Hi everyone, welcome back. Sorry if the audio quality is not as good over in this corner of the studio. So there's been a couple of updates. First of all, let's talk about the main channel. So what I'm doing at the moment this month is kind of working on longevity. So I'm focusing more on products, getting products updated. Now that I've finally gotten over my hurdle of not working on them, which was a weird kind of psychological mental block, I'm now focusing more on the business side of trying to keep the flow going, and also now starting to explore the possibility of doing actual marketing, so like actual paid advertisement, which funnily enough is something that I've kind of avoided the whole time. Like in the last 6 or whatever years it's been of doing YouTube and making products, I've managed to avoid doing any advertising at all in terms of like actually paying people to talk about the products, or just to put product placements anywhere. So whether it's like paid promotional videos or advertisement slots on websites, never done that at all, never needed to. But in terms of like scaling up a business, I'm starting to consider it now. So adapting the content, thinking about, okay, well, if I was having a flow of people that don't necessarily know me but trying to get them as customers, where am I going to do that? I don't really want to do it to the main channel because it'll disrupt demographic percentages, so it should be for the other channel, Curtis Holt Online. How am I going to split content up? What sort of campaigns will I do? So I've been thinking about that quite a bit. At the same time, the lab has grown a little bit. It's quite messy at the moment because there's been a lot of experimental things. This is a brand new microscope, by the way. I've now got my 4K Sony attached to it as well, so I've now increased my capability for microscopies. I've 3D printed an adapter, but you may notice that on this one I had a little problem with the organic supports. Basically, I was using a PVA PLA system, so PLA for printing things, but PVA dissolvable supports. However, I clearly didn't look after things well enough because one of the extruders on my 3D printer has now become clogged and it won't purge and it's making an awful noise. So I need to disassemble that. So there are a few technicalities when it comes to fabricating things that I still need to work out. With this, I can now do more accurate things like blood smear analyses, so differential leukocyte counts. So this is all contributing to my kind of biomed education. I've done counts for myself and now also some family members, which has actually brought up some potential concerns, which, I'm not qualified to diagnose anyone with anything, but we do have a bunch of health conditions as a family, so it's been interesting kind of visually seeing those. I did a late night analysis of one family member in particular who is on a whole bunch of medication, and I noticed a large number of what they call Burr cells, BURR cells, not to be confused with spur cells. They can be a sign of like poor preparation of a slide, but they can also be a sign of kidney disease. So at some point later in the week, they're going to be coming back, and then I'll have another look as well. But I can actually show you the microscope feed. So there is vignetting because the adapter is not perfect. As you can tell, I got my measurements slightly wrong, so I need to close the gap at the top to actually hold the camera properly in place. What we're looking at is a zoomed in, slightly cropped version of that family member's blood smear. This is as far back as it goes, so it's all zooming in from here. So we are now at the 10 times magnification. And if you watch any of my previous microscope videos, you may be able to tell immediately that there's a difference in clarity here. There are some artifacts from the camera sensor on the screen that you might see actually sticking to the frame as I move back and forth, but otherwise the clarity is good. And the colorful blue sections, or the blue spots that we see poking through all of the cells, are the white blood cells. So they're the things which I've been particularly interested in learning about recently, which is why I did that leukocyte count a little while ago. Blood to me has been of particular interest because most of my genetic conditions are blood related. So nothing looked too strange from a distance, but now we're going to zoom into the 40 times magnification. And from here, things start to look a little bit strange. So again, I know this is something you may not know anything about, but to be fair, I didn't know anything about this at the beginning of the year. So the amount of clarity I'm getting in this is just way better than the previous microscope. But it's also kind of scary. The things we're looking at on the screen are red blood cells, otherwise known as erythrocytes. Structurally, they should be nice and round, plump, if you like. Off to the side, we see that blue color here. That's a neutrophil. That's one of the types of white blood cell. Then you can see how clear that is, especially compared to my previous one. And I can still go in further magnification. What I might do is just put an aim marker on the screen. There we go. So I can actually point to things. So we see neutrophil. But we're going to notice some strangeness with the red blood cells. First of all, we've got a little bit of folding over there. If there is weird shaping, one-off is not that much of a concern from my understanding, but if things are very common, such as the weird spiky nature of Burr cells, then it's more cause for concern if there's a large amount. So what I'm talking about is Do you see around the borders of some of these red blood cells? They are spiky. They look a little bit like sea urchins. That is a representation of a potential pathology, so a potential disease or condition. Or, like I said, for management of the blood smear prior to having a look, or interaction with medication. So like I said, this family member is on a variety of medications. They are categorically elderly as well. So if we do the smear again and these Burr cells reappear in large numbers, then I will encourage them to get a thorough kidney check. Because here in the UK, you cannot rely on your local general practitioner to keep up to date with your checks. I believe this family member is supposed to have frequent kidney checks, but I don't know if they're thorough enough. Now I'm zooming into what is technically the maximum magnification, although at this level we're supposed to use an immersion oil. I am not currently using the oil, but we can still see the spiky nature of the red blood cells. See there? We're going to move somewhat further away. Let's just like scrub. Let's go the distance. Let's find somewhere completely different and see if we can find any more. So here we're seeing generally more plumpish cells. They look nice. Good, good, good. A little bit of folding there. Not too worried about that. I think we're seeing a little bit of spikiness around these center ones. If I change the aperture, sometimes that makes it a little bit clearer. Not always though. There's potential spiking around this cell here. Thankfully, these don't look too bad, although there is spiking on that one on the left there. So there are a few possibilities. This was taken and kept alongside two other samples, which we might consider to be control samples. So they were all maintained in exactly the same condition. They were fixated at the same time, and they were stained at the same time using the same method. The other two do not have any of the Burr cell structures in them, which kind of lowers the possibility of it being a mishandled stain. Okay, I'm finding a couple more of them here, especially this one here to the top right of a neutrophil. So that's why next time that person comes along, I'm going to take the sample, have a look immediately, have a look at them live. Here we go. More Burr cells in this screen section here. So the distribution is inconsistent. It may just be a representation of like the cell walls being weaker, less structurally stable, some kind of like lipid issue. I don't know. But the point is, I can see a few more on the screen here. It's been really interesting finally managing to upgrade to a microscope with 4K, in quotes, capability, because now I can see and assess more than I ever could. And I don't really like the spiky nature of that one under the center dot there, because there's Burr cells and spur cells, and spur cells are more with like fewer longer projections of the cells, and they can tend to be a slightly worse sign. But yeah, I'm no expert, so I'll take a look at the next one and then recommend them to get checked. So that's what's been occupying my mind at the moment, these two things. One is this longevity of a business model, and two is developing my skills and my ability in more of a biological science field. I've even now started to put together a services page on my website for doing freelance things. So what I wanted to do was have like long portfolio pages showing demonstration work, so like use cases for how I could help people for things like 3D visualization, product viz, scientific viz. But then there came a day where I was like, well, if I keep delaying making those pages until I've got a whole bunch of stuff, then I'll never make them. So on Codasol.online/services, there are a couple of pages available now, which is just really basic, and they've got forms there for contact for 3D generalist and scientific visualization freelance work, I suppose. So I shouldn't drag this on for too long. Just wanted to check in, let you know where I've been. Hopefully I can give you more updates soon, but otherwise, have a great day everyone. Let me know if you made it to the end. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.